I have always been fascinated by the might of the Roman Empire. It was an empire built not just on marble cities or clever politics, but on the iron discipline of its legions. Yet among all those proud armies, one stands out for a far stranger reason. The Ninth Legion, one of Rome's most celebrated forces, simply vanished from the pages of history. How could that even happen? How could thousands of trained, battle-hardened soldiers just disappear, leaving not a scrap of evidence behind? The thought still gives me chills. Somewhere out there, hidden beneath centuries of silence, lie the secrets of those lost Roman warriors. The Ninth Legion, also known as the Hispanic Legion, was not just another unit in Rome's vast army. It was one of the toughest, most experienced forces the empire ever raised. Born during the fierce campaigns of Julius Caesar in Gaul, the Ninth carried a proud legacy of victories that helped shape Rome's rise across Western Europe. That title, Hispanic, was not a decoration or an empty honor. It was earned through hard fighting in Spain, where the legion played a decisive role in securing Roman control over the Iberian Peninsula. Its name became a mark of power, a symbol of discipline, endurance, and the relentless expansion of the empire. To the Roman people, the Ninth was much more than a group of soldiers. It stood as living proof of Rome's might, a sign that their civilization could reach far beyond the shores of the Mediterranean. I can almost see it in my mind. Rows of soldiers dressed in shining armor, their steps steady and sure, marching beneath the proud banner of the eagle. That sight alone must have filled every Roman heart with awe and pride. The stories about the Ninth Legion were not just pieces of Roman propaganda meant to impress the public. They captured something much deeper, the very spirit of how Rome fought its wars. The Ninth embodied the perfect blend of precise organization and unstoppable determination that made the empire so powerful. The men who filled its ranks were no rookies. Many were hardened veterans who had survived brutal campaigns in faraway provinces. They had endured freezing winters, endless marches, and the unforgiving sound of steel clashing against steel. Each one of them carried scars, some on their bodies, others in their memories. These soldiers were the living image of the ideal Roman warrior. Disciplined when building their camps, fierce and fearless in battle, and utterly loyal to the chain of command that held Rome together. It was that rare mix of personal toughness and collective unity that set the Ninth apart. Together, they became more than a fighting force. They became a legend, one of the most respected legions in the entire history of the empire. As Rome pushed its borders farther into the unknown, the Ninth Legion, proudly carrying the title Hispanic, brought with it not only the sword but also the sense of Roman order. Wherever they went, they built roads, forts, and towns, carving the Roman way of life into foreign soil. They were both conquerors and builders, clearing the path for governors, merchants, and settlers who followed behind them. Their presence meant something greater than military power alone. It was a statement. Rome was not just visiting. Rome was there to stay. By the start of the 2nd century after Christ, the Ninth Legion was stationed far from home, at a place the Romans called Eboracum, what we know today as the city of York. From that cold and windswept fortress, Rome tried to impose order over the wild frontier of Britain, a land where tribal uprisings never truly ended. Beyond the fortified walls stretched the rough and mysterious lands of Caledonia, a region of thick forests, hidden valleys, and fierce hill tribes who would rather die than bow to an empire. When the order came for the Ninth to march north, it was not just another routine patrol. It was a challenge, a test of Roman strength against a land and a people who refused to be conquered. The journey into Caledonia was dangerous from the very beginning. Scouts reported shifting alliances among the tribes, attacks from hidden paths, and ambushes waiting in narrow passes. Supply lines were struck without warning, and the cold, damp air carried the uneasy silence of a land that watched every Roman step. Marching deeper into those hostile northern lands meant leaving behind the comfort and safety of stone fortresses and stepping into the untamed wild, where even the ground beneath your feet could turn against you. The wilderness of Caledonia was not just another battlefield. It was alive, unpredictable, and merciless. We were soldiers trained for war, men molded by discipline and steel. But even the toughest among us knew that in Caledonia, Sheer numbers and heavy armor were no promise of survival. Every mile north felt like moving further away from the empire's reach, into a world that belonged to someone or something else entirely. As the Ninth pressed forward, the tension between Rome and the tribes hardened like stretched iron, ready to snap. The people who lived in those highlands, the tribes of the Altiplani, were nothing like the enemies we had faced before. Rome had long underestimated them, calling them savages, but out there we learned respect the hard way. They were fierce, tireless fighters who knew every valley, every stream, and every shadow that could hide a warrior. In the endless fog and the dim light of the northern frontier, we faced a kind of war the Mediterranean world never prepared us for. These were not grand battles fought in open fields under banners and sunlight. They were fights that came out of nowhere. Sudden strikes from the mist, arrows in the dark, raids on our camps while men slept. Every night, the sound of the wind could have been the whisper of an attack. That constant strain began to eat away at the unity that once made us unbreakable. For centuries, whispers have told that the campaign ended in disaster. A legion that once carried the pride of Rome to distant corners of the world may have been swallowed whole by that savage land, cut off from reinforcements, lost amid forests and hills crawling with enemies who knew every hidden path and every crossing of the river. Maybe it was a massive ambush that finished them. Maybe a long, merciless siege, or the slow bleeding of their supply lines until there was nothing left but hunger and exhaustion. Whatever the cause, many believe the Ninth met its end somewhere in that wild northern country, its banner torn, its name wiped from the memory of Rome itself. To this day, historians still argue over what really happened. Did the Ninth Legion truly vanish in the wilderness of Britain? Or did Rome, proud and unwilling to admit defeat, bury the truth to protect its reputation? No one can say for certain. What remains is a mystery that has echoed through the ages, the disappearance of the Ninth Legion, one of the greatest enigmas in Roman history. Over the years, many scholars have tried to uncover what truly happened to the Ninth Legion, and yet no single answer has ever satisfied everyone. Some historians insist that the legion met its end right there in Britain, crushed during a massive uprising that wiped its very name from the island's memory. Others, however, argue that the Ninth was quietly transferred back to the mainland, only to disappear later in distant wars, lost in the chaos of fragmented records and, perhaps, deliberate silence from Rome itself. Each theory reveals more than just guesswork. It exposes how uncertain our ancient sources really are, and how complex the machinery of the Roman military could be. One of the more convincing explanations places the legion's destruction somewhere in the wild lands of Germany. The tribes along the Rhine and the Danube were some of the fiercest enemies Rome ever faced. During the 2nd century, revolts often erupted without warning, turning those frontiers into brutal killing grounds. For any legion sent there, the risk of being overwhelmed was constant. In those regions, entire Roman units could vanish after a bloody defeat, and when that happened, the empire often chose silence over public embarrassment. The truth is, there are no detailed accounts to confirm this theory, but the gaps in the military archives keep it alive. To some researchers, those missing records are as telling as any written proof. Another school of thought points eastward, toward the great deserts and cities of Asia Minor and Mesopotamia, where Rome clashed with the powerful Parthian Empire. If the Ninth was redeployed there, its men would have faced an entirely different kind of war. Swift horsemen, skilled archers, and the deadly art of sudden ambushes in open sands. The Romans were trained for disciplined formations, not the unpredictable rhythm of desert warfare. A defeat in such a theater could easily have led to their disappearance. Rome, proud as ever, was known to conceal humiliating losses, especially those suffered at the hands of Eastern. One of the more convincing explanations places the legion's destruction somewhere in the wild lands of Germany. The tribes along the Rhine and the Danube were some of the fiercest enemies Rome ever faced. During the 2nd century, revolts often erupted without warning, turning those frontiers into brutal killing grounds. For any legion sent there, the risk of being overwhelmed was constant. In those regions, entire Roman units could vanish after a bloody defeat, and when that happened, the empire often chose silence over public embarrassment. The truth is, there are no detailed accounts to confirm this theory, but the gaps in the military archives keep it alive. To some researchers, those missing records are as telling as any written proof. Over time, the Lost Legion became more than history. It became a symbol, a challenge thrown against the authority of Rome itself. Among the northern tribes, people passed down stories claiming their ancestors had defeated an entire Roman army. To them, the legend was not just a tale of victory, but a mark of pride and defiance, proof that even the might of the empire could be broken. For the Romans, however, the thought was unsettling. The idea that disciplined soldiers could vanish without a trace stirred a kind of reverent fear, a reminder that no army, no matter how powerful, is beyond the reach of fate. Even today, the mystery of the Ninth Legion continues to capture the human imagination. Modern writers, filmmakers, and storytellers have breathed new life into the legend, turning it into tales of brotherhood, betrayal, and loss. To new audiences, the Ninth stands as a tragic band of warriors doomed by destiny, a story that feels less like cold history and more like a timeless warning. Whether or not these versions match archaeological evidence does not seem to matter much anymore. What endures is the idea that myth can sometimes tell truths deeper than the facts themselves. To many, the Ninth Legion is no longer just a military unit lost to time. It has become a symbol of how fragile human ambition can be, and how easily even the greatest empires can vanish into the fog of history. In recent decades, archaeologists have begun to uncover faint traces that might reshape what we know. Inscriptions discovered in the region of Nemea in the Low Countries suggest that at least part of the Ninth Legion may have survived its supposed destruction, perhaps transferred from Britain and stationed there decades later. These findings do not answer every question, but they remind us that history is never truly finished. Sometimes it only sleeps, waiting to be found again beneath the soil. The new evidence has forced many of us to rethink everything we once believed about the fate of the Ninth Legion. It challenges the idea that the Legion was wiped out entirely on the northern frontier and instead paints a far more complicated picture, one of survival, movement, and slow disappearance. Perhaps the Ninth did not fall in a single battle at all. Maybe it splintered over time, its soldiers scattered across different provinces of the empire, absorbed into new units until their original identity was little more than a memory. Some historians even suggest that remnants of the Legion might have reached the eastern frontiers, fighting in the harsh and shifting borderlands against the Parthian Empire. The occasional appearance of the Legion's name in isolated inscriptions hints at its continued existence, though not as the proud and unified force it once had been. It may have lingered quietly within the machinery of Rome's military system, a ghost of its former glory. If that is true, then the Ninth did not die in a blaze of barbarian fury somewhere in Britain. It simply faded away, not destroyed by enemy blades, but erased by time, bureaucracy, and the steady decay of memory. Its disappearance, then, may not have been the result of defeat at all, but of something more deliberate. The truth is, Rome was not only a master of conquest, it was also a master of image. Legions were symbols of imperial might, and their loss could shake the faith of citizens and soldiers alike. When a legion fell or disbanded, it could be politically inconvenient, a stain on the empire's reputation. And so, through quiet transfers, renamed units, and rewritten records, Rome had the power to reshape its own past. In that light, the story of the Ninth is not only about what was lost on the battlefield. It is about what was hidden, altered, and forgotten. It shows how even the strongest armies could vanish not just from the world, but from memory itself. And maybe that is what makes their story endure. History, after all, is not only about what we know. It is about the mysteries we keep searching for. The Ninth Legion may be gone, but their silence still speaks, reminding us that no empire, no matter how mighty, can ever fully control the truth.